Hi guys, welcome to CHATS, a show where I basically meet up with industry professionals in South African fashion and ask them questions about whatever I'm complaining about that week. This week I am with Fung, aka the editor-in-chief of ELLE South Africa, and we're going to talk about diversity and representation in South African fashion media. How are you, Kelly?
I'm well, thank you. I'm so nervous. You're a little dynamite.
Don't be scared.
But I'm excited to chat to you. I think there's such important discussions to be had. But yeah, let's go for it.
How do you think South Africa fares when we're grading on a curve in terms of diversity in our fashion media?
It's a good question. I think that we aren't faring badly, but we're by no means there yet. I think we have to take into account that we are such a young industry, and especially young in the sense that only in recent years have people even started thinking about diversity. You know, not even from a global perspective, but from a local perspective. Like I said, we're incredibly young, and I think people are starting to. They're starting to drive the idea of different perspectives and different thoughts and different opinions. You know, I think for the longest time, it was really one person's opinion, one person's vision that was executed through the pages of the magazine. And I think the world has changed so much that that strategy and that process doesn't necessarily work anymore. So, you know, South Africa, it's ironic because I think our country is so dynamic in its diversity, and that's really what South Africa actually stands for. So it's ironic that we're only starting to look at it now and starting to put things in place to ensure that diversity is covered and that we are pushing it to as much as we can. So I don't think we're necessarily ahead of the curve, by no means, but I definitely think we're on the right path.
You don't?
No.
I think we're so ahead, guys. Like, I think when I think of South African fashion media, because we are a very racially segregated country, so is our fashion media. Let's not lie. Like, ELLE's audience is not the same as certain other fashion publications.
Right.
But I think even within that, the fact that there is space for multiple audiences in one fashion industry and one mainstream fashion industry is not a very common
I think
thing.
it's a positive it's a positive thing, but I think even within the ELLE readership, and even within South Africa alone, the ELLE reader in Cape Town is so different to the ELLE reader in Johannesburg. So I think, you know, and speaking for all the other publications as well, we're still trying to find this balance of incorporating new and innovative thought, but also trying to maintaining an international standard that is expected from our international peers. You know, I can't think of a more difficult country to establish a print brand because like our market is so segregated.
Define your market segment.
Exactly, it's impossible.
It's so hard.
It's impossible. I mean, you look at, you know, US. You know, you put a celebrity on the cover, I can guarantee you every single person in that country knows who that person is. You put a locally brilliant celebrity on the cover here in South Africa, I can tell you now someone in Cape Town doesn't know who that person is. Or if you put a Cape Town celebrity, there's someone in Joburg who has no clue who it is.
I'm going to be very honest with you.
Right.
When you put Gaga Nonku and Mante on the cover and people are like, who are they? I almost stabbed 4 people.
I know, so did I.
Do you think the problem is how diversity, ever since it's become like this global chat, like a lot of things that happen in fashion, like real issues, it's been kind of, not, I won't say minimized, but reduced to just a superficial aspect of just seeing a black model and just seeing a white model and not thinking in a South African context that, okay, so let's start with the models. It can't just be black and white. We're a very racially diverse country.
Right.
And also can't just be South African black because we have a very diverse country in terms of refugees and so on
Right.
and so forth. And then you like go further into that, and then we're like, okay, but diversity is more than just the models. Like, who's a photographer, who's a fashion editor,
Sure.
who's a stylist, who's a makeup artist.
I think you hit on such a good point there. For the longest time, I've been thinking about what I would bring to what my point of view is in the fashion industry, and how to convey that in the pages of ELLE, which has always been such a well-loved brand. For me, at the moment, diversity is such a huge topic, and I hope one that is not trend-based. And I think for the large part, I think a lot of media houses are covering, world issues to jump on the bandwagon, to highlight it because it's important to talk about it now. But there's such an insincerity about that. Yeah. My point of view is to, yes, always include diverse thoughts, bring in people to work on the magazine who have a completely different opinion to mine. To completely, people who are clever in tech, people who are clever in fashion, people who are clever in writing and literature and art and in sports, and bringing it all together, so that we're almost not highlighting the people's otherness and people's differences, but rather normalizing it. I think that's, for me, how we're actually going to overcome this issue of diversity, is not to highlight a plus-size model in an editorial once a month, or not even once a month, once a year.
3
and
times a year.
yeah, and
Instagram.
exactly, and being like, wow, we're so progressive. We've done an editorial that's never been done before with a plus-size woman. For me, that only highlights otherness. It doesn't highlight diversity.
Yeah.
I think the attempt is there, and the intention is good, but ultimately you're just outcasting people and highlighting their differences. My point of view is that we've got to try and bring it in such a way that it again normalizes people's differences, and it doesn't become a point of attraction because it's trendy.
Yeah.
So that's really important for me when putting together ELLE every month. When I put those girls on the cover, it's not because for me, they have such important messages as women and as young South Africans. There's something really interesting to say individually. For me, they all three represent this this wave of creatives that are doing really important work, and it's not about the hype, and it's not about playing to the public just for the sake of doing so. They actually have an important message to share, and that's, for me, why it was such a joy and such a privilege to put them on their first cover. It's tricky because not a lot of people said they didn't know who they were, or they were just influencers, but I can completely disagree with that. I think there's so many magazines in this world, they put a model on the cover and they're unknown. So it's about also buying into and believing in your own local creative currency, and the people that are doing fantastic things. I think we should be highlighting them.
Do you think that's also a problem in terms of diversifying fashion media, in how people aren't aware of enough local creatives for them to be a currency in terms of selling product and magazines?
Definitely. I think people, like I said, we're not ahead of the curve just yet, because I think only recently, in recent years, have we started even looking at local, young local creatives. I think people are they need to be educated. I think people need to start looking at things that perhaps they've never seen before, because I don't know if you find this, but for me, it's quite fascinating to see that people only like really and appreciate what they understand already. They like something because they've seen it before, or because they've been
told before that this is how it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
Somebody comes with even if you, like, you're right, like, even with my third, it's like, no, this is not how bridal satin is supposed to be used. That is why it is ugly.
Yeah.
And people will fight you on it.
They'll fight you on it because they've seen it before, and they've seen it, So I think the idea, a big mission of mine, is to open up that field, and open up the voices, and to make people, and especially South Africans, because I think we've been so cocooned for so long, and it's, only looking to international things, that they almost forget that our job as editors and journalists is to uncover and to communicate and to inform and to spread out and widen. So yeah, I think that those three in particular, it was a huge risk for me to do, but I was quite adamant.
You mentioned the cocoon in which fashion in South Africa has existed for 20 odd years. I love watching that cocoon break down.
Me too.
And like people have little meltdowns because what are all these teenagers doing at Fashion Week, or what is this 19-year-old doing with styling credits? Do you think this cocoon and existing in a vacuum in a way, the way that fashion in South Africa has, is why our diversity is not where it could be at this point?
Definitely. I think things have been done in this particular way for so long, and I think this is with any change globally in South Africa or internationally. You know, people, you know, when bloggers started coming on the scene, all the editors were like getting a little bit like butthurt about it. But the thing is, fashion is about change, and when it's ideally, it's not really about clothing. It's a reflection of our time, and so we've got to be able to openly embrace it. And I think because we've existed in such a vacuum, such a small, closed space where everybody knows everybody in the industry, it's absolutely affected the diversity factor. But having said that, I mean, I'm so excited to see what the teenagers are doing in the country, and young creators such as yourself, who are you're giving yourself a voice, and I love that. And I think it's totally inspirational. And again, that comes into my philosophy about how the only way to make a really good publication is to bring in people's ideas that are different from your own. But also, having said that, for me, it's so important that people still learn, and there's still an element of wanting to grow and develop yourself and learn from the people who have come before you, because they do know. And almost, for me, the only way that I think that our industry is going to be taken seriously, internationally, locally, is if we only produce and we shed light on extremely good content, and extremely good, like, it doesn't matter if you're talented. What you need to produce work that is of quality, and you need to put your money where your mouth is. I think the problem is there's a lot of hype around people that perhaps haven't put their money where their mouth is, and there is no substance. So I think we're still in that weird teenage phase in South African fashion where people are excited to follow anything that is kind of
seems lucrative.
Yeah, that's kind of glittering. Yeah. But you know, dig a little deeper, there's nothing there. Yeah. So my huge battle, and I suppose what I find challenging is to make sure that our readers know the difference between what is actually really good and what is just hype.
Yeah.
And that was exactly that cover. I think for me, it was an example of 3 women doing amazing things creatively, with substance, with meaning, with value, with consistency,
quality, with the red wedding dress on a Monday.
Exactly, all of that. Yeah, they may not be overhyped. Maybe they should be overhyped, but they're not.
Yeah.
And that, for me, that's where I'm personally struggling with. Yes, open the doors to young creators, but also let's bear in mind it's not a free for all.
Yeah.
We've got to do something important and interesting in order to be featured, in order to have a voice.
What you're saying now is that, like, hype is a new barrier of entry, like internet hype, social media hype, right. TV hype, radio hype, whatever, is this new social pressure and therefore barrier of entry in South Africa that stifles creativity, in my opinion. Because if people are focused on garnering hype in order to get the opportunity to be in galleries and publications and shows, then they're going to dilute themselves in order to fit a certain box.
Well, what you're saying, I kind of agree with you, but I do think there are people who can balance the hype and go after the hype, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But they also have something to say that is actually of substance. So I believe that you can be both, and that is where the talent is. That's where what we need to be seeking out. Not just this flimsy hype that I think people so often are attracted to, because why not? It's incredibly appealing. You get to send free stuff, you get to go travel, you get to do. But how are you growing the industry? How are you opening doors for other people?
How are you contributing?
How are you contributing? And that's where I think my question mark lies. But there's nothing wrong with being hyped up, but also being, you know, doing important work. I think it should go hand in hand.
Yeah.
It should go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But you're right. I do think aiming for the so-called fame and hype and somewhat superficial status is a barrier of entry, because then what if that goes away? Then what?
Do you think we need to fine-tune and better fit barriers of entry? For instance, when people like these days, when people are looking for interns, why are they still asking for a driver's license, 2 years work experience, a degree, as if fees must fall has not been happening like down the road for
I hear
so
you.
long.
The whole intern thing is a case-by-case scenario. Yeah. I think a lot of people utilize interns in the wrong way. They make them go get coffee or do all the grunt work. That's definitely was never my approach. Look, I think the whole thing now is that obviously the industry has had to wake up very quickly and pay these girls and boys, rightly so. But that in itself has caused another barrier of entry, because obviously it's not anyone who's wanting to learn can come and learn. Yeah. I mean, I miss that so much in a sense, because I would get emails daily and people would be like, please can I come and learn? I'd be like, absolutely, come for as long as you can afford to. We'll teach you, we'll get you networking, we'll get you in the know, and then you go off. But now, because people are needing to be paid, I mean, we cannot exclude people anymore like that. You know, there's obviously fewer opportunities for people to come and learn, and that for me is the saddest thing. Yeah,
it really is. So, because for a lot of people, that was the only way that they could get their foot in the door.
Exactly.
It's so, guys, it's so annoying. Barriers of entry are like one of my biggest gripes.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them could be done away with.
It could,
if it's like everyone just sat down and had like a kumbaya moment.
Exactly, and maybe, you know, I do think that South Africa is so desperate need of a really reliable fashion council, or like a you know, like I know that the one exists, but I believe
but they don't have a website. In how many years?
I think they don't even have a you know.
Who's in it anymore?
But you know, like equal pay, like, you know, balanced, you know,
contract regulation,
exactly.
Some kind of governing body.
Assistance to get into the industry, because often, you know, that is the biggest barrier.
Through them.
Yeah,
that would actually be really cool.
And be fed through. There's so many. I mean, there are solutions to this. There are
so many, and I think a lot of it also is that like people don't know of all the available options.
Yeah, I didn't.
Right?
I didn't when I started.
I still don't I'm not completely sure either. And I think, well, I actually had like a huge argument with one of the people I work with. Yeah. Where we were talking about, like you were talking about mentoring.
Yeah.
And so forth. I honestly feel like in the condition that the industry is, I think that it would be amazing for a lot more experienced people took the time to mentor, not necessarily the ones who are to mentor more people, but more experienced people to mentor, job shadows, even conversations, like answering tweets and emails and stuff like that. Do you think your peers in the industry do that as much as possible?
No. To put it frankly, I think also it's getting so difficult, and you know, this era where print is declining. I mean, it's definitely not dying, but it's a difficult space, and teams are smaller, and people are doing far more than what they used to. I think that is one thing that often goes out the window. It becomes secondary, having, you know, time to mentor someone, or to you know, improve their skill or find their strengths. It's definitely not something that is happening enough, and as publications close and as it gets smaller and smaller, that those opportunities also. So it's this constant cycle where, you know, I suppose the more magazines suffer, the fewer people buy.
The less budget.
The less support, and it just spirals. But you know, people graduate and they still want to be a part of the industry. So it's it's really strange environment that we're in.
Masochists, actually.
Yeah, we're just killing ourselves.
Yeah. A lot of complaints that I get is like people talking about younger people,
right,
who are doing it for themselves, being cocky and ungrateful or entitled. And I think that's a case by case thing, because some people are very cocky and ungrateful and entitled. That's not a lie. But now when the people the gatekeepers who are supposed to be opening the door are like padlocking the thing because they've had a couple of rude interns and turning around and doing nothing else to educate kids on what you're supposed to do, so people don't call you cocky and rude and entitled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know. I'm 100% agree with you. I think it's so easy to resort to that. They're just so entitled. They don't want to learn. But I think people do want to learn. And if you apply and you want to come here, you want to learn.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.
And kids are so desperate to learn. Oh, sorry. Yeah, kids are so desperate to learn because there's so little information in the South African context on how to make it in fashion.
Right, and even in our own tertiary education, our fashion tertiary, it's
terrible.
It's just not good enough, you know.
Terrible. And kids are paying 100,000 rand a year to be lied to, or to be fed things about working in Japan and Italy when you're in Joburg. So yeah, last question, because obviously, let's say in 5 years, where do you want to see diversification in fashion media as far as people who work in fashion media? Like when you go to an event, or I don't know, do you guys have conferences?
I mean, we're working on it. We're working on a conference. But where do I want to see fashion media going?
Yeah, diversification in fashion media.
Well, I don't want it to be a case of, I'm putting a black girl on the cover, therefore I'm so progressive. I'm so over that. It's not about black and white. It's not about putting a token black person in the pages. It means nothing at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, I think back in the day with the Franca Sazani, she did the all black issue. I think it worked for that time. But we're in 2018, and it shouldn't be a pat on your back to have
diversification issues.
Yeah, it shouldn't. It should just be, like I said, it should really just be a norm. And I think I'd like to see, personally with my title, I don't want it to continue to be frivolous. I want it to be really clever. I want clever girls to want to buy it, and I want, and to read it online, and to create, and to have a message, and to create clever content that really makes South Africans aware that fashion is not frivolous, and it's not just about clothing, and it's not just about the Durban July or the polo. It's a reflection of who we are as a country. So I'd really like to see that going forward in fashion media. Thank you
so much for answering my emails. And
no, of course.
For the best in this infantile industry.
Okay, let's do it together.